it's Michelle Silva. I'm the founder of the Savvy CMO, and I'm your host here on the Marketing Hour, where we deliver an hour's worth of marketing insights in just 30 minutes or less. Sometimes we do a little more, sometimes we do a little less, but generally around 30 minutes. And each week, I'm going to share a strategy either solo with myself or I'll sit down with an expert guest. And you're going to hear one powerful marketing approach that's made a real impact and how you can apply it to your own business. Now, before we dive in, this show is for informational purposes only. I know the legal stuff, and there are no guarantees, and results may vary. Always use your best judgment, do your research, and take what works for you. I'm so excited to have you here on my podcast this week. I'd love to hear what your most successful marketing strategy is and how impactful that has been for your business. And
Okay.
but before we get into that, I'd love to hear a little bit more about you and why you're here and maybe something fun that people don't know about you.
Something fun that most people don't know about me. That's an easy one. I spent 7 years working as a commercial fisherman on Alaska's Bering Sea. And
Wow.
and I'll tell you, when I was my father passed away when I was just 16.
Mm.
But he in the 60s worked as a commercial fisherman in Alaska. And
Wow.
and so his experience was, I remember him telling me when I was a kid, Kev, the harder you work, the more successful you'll be. And that was his best advice. And
Mm-hmm.
I have since found that, you don't have to work that hard to be
Yeah.
successful. So, but you do it. Having a good work ethic is certainly a good thing. And
Yes.
and there were times, on that fishing boat, I'm like, man, Dad, if you can see me now, I hope you're proud because, man, this is some work.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I did have a friend many years ago, uh, when I guess she must have been about, well, she's my same age. She must have been about 19 at the time or so, and she decided that's what she was going to do. So she ended up being one of the only women out on one of those fishing boats.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. There
I
wasn't many women. We had a gal on our fishing boat at one time and she did great. She pulled her weight and but yeah,
yeah,
you're right. In that industry, there's not a lot of women in that industry for sure.
yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, that's definitely some interesting fact about you. I'd love to hear some more. So tell me a little bit more so our audience can understand who you are and what you do
Yeah.
and love to hear it.
So the reason I worked for 7 years as a commercial fisherman was because I had this desire to be an entrepreneur. And I thought, I said, well, it takes money to start a
Yeah.
business. So I'm going to save some money, which I did. And
Hmm.
and I started my last fishing trip, I actually almost got thrown overboard. That's when I decided. In fact, this
Wow.
scar is from that accident. We got hit with a broadside with a rogue wave, threw me
Ah.
all the way across the boat, and I smacked into the railing with my face.
Oh,
And
wow.
this was from that in 1995. And
Mm.
and surviving that, I was incredibly grateful that I survived that. But I also realized, you know what? I think you've saved up enough money. I finished up my contract and came home, and I never returned
Mhm.
to Alaska as a fisherman again. And the
Yeah.
next year, I started my very first business, which was a cleaning and restoration company, carpet cleaning.
Yeah.
And I had met this guy in Seattle. He was in that industry and looking from the outside looking in, he looked like he was doing pretty good. And I thought, well, gosh, if
Yeah.
he could do it, so can I. That was my
Hmm.
sole motivation and inspiration for getting into that business.
Wow.
And I'd like to say it was something more lofty and more noble, but it wasn't. I just thought I could make money doing this.
Yeah.
And over the course of the next year, I promptly blew through about $300,000, and
Oh.
I still didn't have a clue what I was doing. And
Hmm.
so this whole idea of like, if I just had more money, then I'd be successful. No, not necessarily true. So,
Yeah.
but I found this guy by the name of Joe Polish in a trade publication for the industry. And his message just really spoke to me. And so I sent off some information he was offering, ended up getting his marketing help, and ended up hiring him. And over the next 3 years, we completely transformed my business into a by referral only company that was the top 3% of cleaning companies in the industry.
Wow.
And so I really learned the importance of good marketing, good systems, all of that. Just the stuff to how to really run a business that I did not know and stuff.
That's a
And
lot. And there's a lot to marketing and a lot to running a business that
oh,
people don't realize when they get into
yeah,
it, just like
for
you did.
sure, for sure. And and one of the things I did in 2000, I ended up starting this website as an extension of that company. It was called getmoldsolutions.com, probably one of the ugliest websites ever on the internet.
I
And
don't know about that. There's some pretty ugly ones, even now.
mine was definitely an ugly website. So, but within 3 years, that website was producing about 15,000 a month for the business. And we were selling mold test kits, cleaning product, informational products, and so by 2003, Joe had invited. He said, "Kevin, why don't you come here in November for the annual event and show everybody what you're doing with your website?" And I'm
Hmm.
like, "Okay." I said, "I can do that." And he's like, "And before you come, make sure you document what you do and how you do it, and
Hmm.
and put it into a course, because the folks, a certain percentage of them, they're going to want your help, and just make sure that you're ready to give that to them, because once they hear from you, that's what they'll want." and
Hmm.
uh, and so, this annual event, I don't know, there was probably 300 cleaning and restoration professionals there. I had never spoke in public in my life, Michelle.
Oh my goodness.
And I was so nervous. I was nervous to get on stage and just speak in public. I was like, gosh, please don't let Joe down.
Hmm.
And but once I took the stage and once I started sharing, people were engaging, and I'm like, oh, this is really cool. They're liking it, and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this is okay. And
Hmm.
and and so I just shared what I wanted to share. And at the end, I just said, hey, if this resonates with you, if you feel I might be able to help you, well, here's what that will look like. Here's what the
Yeah.
investment is. And we made $35,000 in sales of that course. And
Wow.
that was what I said. I was like, wow, look at
Yeah.
that.
Right? That's
And uh,
incredible.
and so, and that was me and Joe. I didn't know it at the time. Looking back, I learned that what we did was called a strategic partnership.
Hmm.
And he had an audience of people that he felt that I had something of value that they would appreciate knowing about and stuff.
Hmm.
And so we were able to do something together that neither one of us could have done on our own, and
Yeah.
make a much bigger impact together that way. And after that experience, I was like, man, I want to do a whole lot more of this. And so we did over the next 12 years. Actually, the following spring, April 19th of '04, I sold the cleaning and restoration business. We
Hmm.
moved into the publishing company full time, and we ended up selling $16.1 million worth of that training over the next 12 years.
Wow.
And I did almost 500 strategic partnerships in that period of time. And
Hmm.
that's what taught me the value of right relationships.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what laid the foundation to the work that I get to do today, which is I get to be this connector and conduit of trust for some amazing entrepreneurs. And I facilitate these kinds of relationships. I facilitate these kinds of partnerships nowadays. And I get compensated for doing that. And that is the most rewarding thing I can even imagine. And that I get to make a really big impact by just serving entrepreneurs who are just doing such amazing things in this world. And that's kind of what I get to do now.
That's really a wonderful story. I mean, thinking about your days on that fishing boat and then, getting into the, restoration and cleaning business. And then, I mean, most people would just kind of stop there and just say, well, this is, this is where I'm at, and this is as good as it's going to get.
Hmm.
And taking that leap of faith that, oh, I'm going to do something bigger. I'm meant to do something bigger. And, taking those steps to get there,
Yeah.
and then making it happen and seeing those results, and then where you are today. So I'm curious, how, because of obviously that relationship with Joe Polish, and now he's been around for a long, long time now,
Yeah.
and has
Yeah.
probably made, multi-millions with, other partnerships and so forth. What do you think that, what do you feel like you discovered along the way that was kind of that magic? Was it, just the two of you, or do you think that it was, being able to, like you said, build those partnerships and then take that to the next level? Like, what is almost like that secret sauce, that, that
Yeah.
strategy that you could share with the audience that, would help them maybe make some of their own, strategic partnerships,
Yeah.
and what
Yeah.
would that look like?
So it really comes down to, like, what I really learned was the importance of, so all of those partners in my business. So Joe was the very first one. And then when I moved into that publishing company full time and did almost 500 strategic partnerships over a 12-year period, all of those partners, I was so appreciative of them,
Hmm.
because if not for them, and they were the ones who helped me get my message out into the marketplace and stuff, and if not for them and their role, my business would not have grown the way that it did. and
Hmm.
and so I was so incredibly appreciative of them, and so I always focused on everything that I do. I want to further the relationship. So use Joe as example. I want to
Hmm.
further the relationship that I already have with him.
Yeah.
And if I focus on that, and that's just kind of let that be my guiding principle, my North Star, if you will,
Hmm.
then you know what, things should go pretty okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they have. And so there was a lot of things I figured out. So, like, I'll I'll share a few things, and I mean, the big thing has been partnering itself,
Yeah.
and always treating relationships the way that I just spoke about,
Hmm.
honoring those relationships for what they are. And when we do that, and we do that over the long haul,
Yeah.
I've been doing this for, well, I met Joe in let me see here. I want to get 1995, the end of
Wow.
95. So that has been almost 30 years
Hmm.
that goes back. So 30 years that I've been doing this. Well, I'll tell you, I've created quite a reputation at this point. People in
Hmm.
my world, they just
Yeah.
know me for doing what I do. And I've just built so much trust with the right people that it's really easy, because so many people just know me, and I get connected to, and we've got this podcast, Million Dollar Relationships, that gets me connected with so many people and stuff. And so, but it's all about the way we treat others. And
Yeah.
so I can dig deeper into this, Michelle, with you if you'd like,
Hmm.
and just give specific things that I've done. But I want to follow your lead and stuff, and make sure,
Yeah.
because I want to be valuable for your folks and stuff.
Yeah. I think that, I agree with you, because I think relationships are essential to, not only our personal lives, but and definitely in business. And when you, like, for instance, some gal reached out to me last year sometime on LinkedIn,
Okay.
and now we're, connected, and we help support each other. And she just had me on her webinar, and I'm going to have her on my podcast as well. And I think you're right. When we treat each other with respect, and we value the relationship, and it's not just about what we get, but it's about what we give.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
know that you've talked a lot about this too, and also in the receiving, because that's something I know that is important to you, is that, not just in what I give, but am I also good at receiving?
Yeah.
Because it's a relationship. It's not a one way.
That's right.
It might be a conduit, but it's a two way.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about that because I know that aspect is something that's very dear to you.
Yeah. So, as a lot of entrepreneurs are really great at giving and serving and helping others, And in fact, if I were to ask you, you listening to this podcast, where do you rate on a scale of 1 to 10, meaning one, I'm absolutely terrible at it, or 10, I'm world class at giving and I bet most of you would rate yourself pretty high. You might
Yeah.
rate yourself a 7, 8, 9, 10 when it comes to giving to others because you just love doing. You love the feeling that comes from giving to somebody who just really appreciates that.
Hmm.
Now, if I ask, and you don't, nobody has to answer this, but if I ask on the same scale of 1 to 10, when it comes to receiving, how good are you? How good do you feel you are at not just receiving,
Hmm.
but even proactively asking for what you want as well? And,
Hmm.
and most people will not score themselves nearly as high in
Yeah.
that regard. And I'll tell you, the challenge with this, and I am so grateful that 12 years ago I had one of my mentors point this out to me. And he's like, Kevin, he's like, he's like, you're a giving guy. He's like, let me ask you. I was like, that feeling that you get when you give to somebody who just genuinely appreciates it, how does that make you feel? And I'm like, oh man, I was like, Jesse, there is not a better feeling in the world than that. I love that feeling.
Hmm.
And he's like, right? And he said, but do you realize by not opening yourself up to receiving, he said, you are depriving other people from having that experience that you just told me was the most amazing experience. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I never thought about that.
Yep.
And once you have this new perspective, I like I said, that was 12 years ago. And
Hmm.
he just opened my whole like just mind up to a new way of looking at things that I had not considered at all. And
Yeah.
and so ever since then, I've just been on this journey and this exploration to see how much I can expand my own receiving muscles. And
Hmm.
knowing full well that the more I'm able to receive, the more I'm able to give to and stuff.
Yeah.
And
And a
so
lot of
that's
people, yeah, a lot of people don't even think about that side of it. They
yeah,
think,
yeah,
you know, when somebody says, well, what can I do for you? Usually the answer is, I don't know. I don't
that's right.
know how you
Or
can help
I
me.
used to even say, "Oh, nothing, I'm good," because I didn't want to bother people or put them out. So I
Exactly.
wouldn't. I'm good.
Hmm. Yeah. And how do you help other people if you're, not willing to receive help yourself? So
Yeah,
I think that's
yeah,
so key. It's
yeah.
something that I think we all, can tap into and learn from, right?
Yes, yeah,
And how does that like parlay into success, right?
yeah,
Because if Joe, for instance, wasn't in the business of, helping, but, also receiving for himself or, and of course, in your case, you are helping now to facilitate, relationships and you're receiving and you're giving. And so how has that helped in your business? How has that made you more successful?
So I'll give you a really great example of this. This will go back a few years. This will be so from summer of 2017. I was getting ready to host an event right here at my home for a small group of entrepreneurs. It was the first time I'd ever done something like this.
Mhm.
But I was getting about 15 entrepreneurs who were flying in from around the country because I wanted to start getting introducing them
Mhm.
and facilitating relationships. And so this one guy that I had invited, he was a local guy, and I met him through a mutual friend of mine.
Hmm.
And this guy was actually an Amazon seller selling about $2 million a year worth of cat tunnels on Amazon.
Oh
And
my
I'm just like, I mean, I was absolutely blown away. I was like, $2 million a year worth of cat tunnels.
God. Wow. Yeah. I would have been blown away
And
as well.
and so, we were having a phone conversation and I was telling him about the event. And he's like, Kev, man, Jeff was totally right. This sounds like this is right up my alley. And if you're inviting me, I totally want to come. And I'm like, yes, I would love to have you join us and stuff. And so we confirmed that. And then he was like, Kev, he said, I just don't know exactly how I'm going to be of value to everybody else.
Hmm.
And I was like, Michael, I said, you know what? I was like, the fact that that is your biggest concern, it speaks volumes about who you are as a person. And I'm just
Hmm.
going to plant this seed with you that, you just come with the intention that you want to contribute. You just want to help and you want to serve and you want to pour into the others. And the how to do that will reveal itself to you while you're here.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
you won't have to worry about it. You'll just know how to do when the time comes. And he's like, Kev, he's like, I can see that. And I totally agree with you. And he's like, done deal, I'm in.
Hmm.
And so I got his credit card info, signed him up. Well, he lives local here. I live actually up north of Seattle, about 40 miles. He actually lives in Seattle. And he
Hmm.
calls me back a couple days later. And he's like, Kev, he's like, I've really been thinking about this and how I could really, contribute to you and the other folks that are coming. And he said, and I don't know if this will work or not. And he's like, I know you're up north of Seattle and I'm here in Seattle, but he's like, I've got this 65-foot yacht here. And if you think it would be a really great experience, he's like, I'd like to offer to host you guys on the yacht. He's like, August is such a beautiful time of year in Seattle. And he's like, I could host you guys and we could go out cruising around Seattle. And he's like, it's a really cool view of Seattle that most people never get to see. And I'm like,
Hmm.
okay. I was like, how much do you need for that? And he's like, Kevin, he's like, I don't want anything for that. He's like, I just want to offer that to you. He's like, that's my gift to you and everybody else. And I'm like, wow. And
Hmm.
Michelle, there would have been a time where I would have been like, Michael, you don't have to do that. You're investing of your time and your money to come here. You don't have to do that too. And I would have probably
Yeah.
shut him down.
Hmm.
And yet he had been thinking for 2 days, how can I contribute to this? And that's what he came up with. That would have
Hmm.
been the worst thing I could have ever done was shut him
Yeah.
down on that,
Yeah.
And so I was like, Michael, thank you
Hmm.
so much. Let's
Yeah.
figure out how we can make this work. And we did. And it was
Hmm.
an amazing experience. And in fact,
I can
Michael and
imagine.
I have done more stuff on the boat together. And
Yeah.
because he got a hold of me a couple years later and he's like, Kev, summer's coming again. Let's do another thing on the boat. He's like, the people you hang out with are amazing. And I want to host more of you guys again. And
Yeah.
so,
I love that story. That's such a wonderful story, in terms of, the giving and the
yeah,
getting
yeah,
and just being able to provide that, value and that impact,
yeah.
because I'm sure that the people who were part of your group, they remember that experience
Oh,
and
totally.
they remember him because of that experience. And
Yeah,
I think that's a really great strategy. And, it sounds, weird maybe to call it a strategy, but it actually is, and what that impact is that is beyond just that, that gift. And I think that, they're in being able to provide value, it doesn't necessarily have to be monetary, like,
no,
with this
no,
guy, although, maybe it did cost some, money or whatever, but that was his gift. And just think about the ripple effect of these relationships.
yeah,
You touch one person, and what does that do, not only for that person, that their community, their own life and business and enrichment. And it's a little bit hard to quantify that, but I know that this is something that you do, as a business now, is you make those relationships part of your business model.
yeah,
And that's something that, a lot of people probably don't think about. They think about, oh, I'll connect you with so and so. and so forth. And they don't think about, not only, they might think about the impact and, doing business with each other, but not necessarily for the person, facilitating
Yeah.
and how that comes about. And
Yeah.
how has this like changed your life in going from the Alaskan fishing boat to the carpet business and then to, the course and now, where you are today? Like how has this evolution impacted your life
Yeah.
and so forth now?
So, these evolutions have been like really, I won't say they've all been painless.
Mhm.
There's been a lot of growth involved. And in fact,
Yeah.
I will tell you, to get to where I'm at right here, right now,
Hmm.
I have had to grow immensely as a
Hmm.
person
Sure.
because the entrepreneurs that I serve today are entrepreneurs that are doing such big things in this world.
Hmm.
They're entrepreneurs that, quite candidly, I used to put them on this pedestal
Yeah.
and not be able to compare myself to them because I'm like, wow, they've done stuff so much bigger than I
Hmm.
have. But what I've come to realize is that even the most successful entrepreneurs, they're all doing the best they can with what they have.
Hmm.
And also some of the most successful entrepreneurs, they are some of the most humble people you would ever meet. That
Yeah.
they're not good about talking about themselves and what they do in a really powerful way. And me, man, I'll talk them up. It's, I will say things about them to other people that they probably wouldn't say themselves because they're like, I don't really like talking about that,
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
seems like bragging and I don't want to come
Mhm.
across that way. And I'm like, I'll talk about you that way. And
Yeah.
so,
But you know what? That's the beauty of things too, because, when you think about that, yeah, we don't want to come across as, bragging or not being humble or anything like that. But when it comes from someone else, it
yeah,
almost carries even more weight that,
yeah,
you did these things and it's so empowering and you've done XYZ and whatever. And look at all of the good that you've done out of this. And coming from someone else, it's like, oh my gosh. And yes, it might put them on a pedestal or whatever, but I think that it really shows that, you know, greater impact. Like I can talk about, myself or things that I've done, but if somebody else says something about me,
mhm,
that's the
mhm.
value of those, of testimonials, right? Or
Yeah,
reviews
yeah,
or, just being able to share, hey, this person helped me and this is what they've done or whatever. I think again that's that relationship piece that you've been talking about throughout this whole episode is building those important relationships, giving value, and also receiving that,
yeah,
and
yeah.
how that has impacted your business today and where you are today. And yeah, we all have growing pains. I think that's just part of our life and part of the
Totally.
journey.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure you've learned, mistakes along the way and lessons along the way. And I'm so grateful to know you. I think, we worked with someone, in common years
Yeah.
ago, and that's how you and I met.
Yeah.
And so just being able to, build upon these relationships after so many years, I think that does prove the value.
Yeah.
And that impact. And so in terms of like, greater impact like to your community, is that something that, you give back like to your community because now you're in a different space than you were 10, 20 years ago or so?
Yeah. In fact, nowadays, so it's interesting because I don't like looking at this as a strategy or a tactic because I just don't see it that way. But
Hmm.
what I do, so it's like, I host these get-togethers on Zoom.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
call it a virtual roundtable. and I get together small groups of entrepreneurs. So we're talking 3 or 4 entrepreneurs at a time, never more than 4, because I want it to
Mhm.
be like this intimate environment,
Yeah.
because it's all about facilitating introductions that lead to meaningful relationships that put money in the bank. And,
Hmm.
and the money in the bank piece is great. I'm all about creating revenue, but
Yeah.
it comes from the relationships. The
Yeah.
relationships first, and then we get that piece right. The natural and organic byproduct of that, because we create more value together, leads to
Yeah.
revenue.
Hmm.
And so these roundtables, I love hosting these roundtables because you'll get these amazing entrepreneurs that are just doing such big things, making such a big impact in the world, and they'll come into this environment because I've invited them,
Hmm.
and they have this level of trust in me that then carries over to everybody else in that environment, because they're like,
Yeah.
well, I trust Kevin, and that's why I'm here. And you know what?
Yeah.
I will tell it's a 2.5 hour time commitment to come to this. And for entrepreneurs of this caliber, 2.5 hours, that's a considerable ask, because their
Yeah.
time is really valuable.
Hmm.
And but when they make the decision to come there, they also know, is like, well, I'm showing up here, and so anybody else that Kevin invites, they got to be my kind of people. Otherwise, he wouldn't have invited them in the first place and stuff.
Yeah.
And so when everybody gets there, nobody knows each other. And yet, 2.5 hours later, they're all exchanging contact information, making plans to follow up with each other. They are figuring out how they can collaborate and co create together. They're referring business to each other. And it happens every single time. And,
That's
and
wonderful.
I love facilitating that. And then there's a certain percentage of folks that they're like, Kev, that was really awesome. Can you and I talk about doing more of
Yeah.
that? And
Yeah.
so,
And there's your strategic partnership over
yeah,
again.
yeah, yeah.
It just
And
kind of all, all evolves together. I love it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, I think this is fantastic. I love talking with you every single time. I always learn more about you. I would love for, my audience to know, where they can find you, how they can, maybe connect with you. I know you've got your podcast if you want to talk about that. So if you have any last, bits of, final piece of advice or anything like that, and then where can listeners find you?
Sure. So, what I will tell you, so last bit of advice. What I have discovered over the years is that no matter how successful somebody is, no matter how big their business is, no matter how great things look from the outside looking in, there is not a person on the face of this earth that gets too much appreciation. And when we are just genuinely appreciative of other people,
Mhm.
we will open so many doors to so many great conversations just by being appreciative.
Yeah.
And I'll just say, don't use that as a strategy or tactic. Don't let it be that. Just let it
Yeah.
be part of who you are. Let it be how you show up. And
Hmm.
and you watch what happens with that.
Yeah.
So as far as how to get a hold of me, yeah, I'm really active on Facebook, Kevin the Connector on Facebook. I do have a website. It could probably use to be updated. But it is. It's kind of a long name. It's maximum-response.com is my website.
Yeah.
And the Million Dollar Relationships podcast, we have been hosting that for almost 3 years now. And hosting this podcast has been hands down the most rewarding and impactful thing I have done in my 30 years as an entrepreneur. It has been such an amazing experience. And so, what we do on this podcast is we give our guests the opportunity to honor a person, or more than one person if they want, that has had just such a profound impact on their life and on their business. And our guests get to honor those people. And then for our listeners who are also entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
founders, and CEOs, we get to inspire them to
Yeah,
place an intentional focus on creating more real, meaningful, rewarding, and profitable relationships in their own lives.
I love
And
that.
so if you know, go ahead and take a look at the podcast.
Mhm.
If it resonates with you and you feel like you've got a great story and somebody you'd like to honor, or more than one person you'd like to honor, hit me up
Mhm.
on Facebook or what have you, and let me know, and maybe we can do a podcast interview together.
I love that. I looked at how many podcasts you've done. I think it's almost 300 episodes.
Yeah, we've done almost, yeah, we've released almost 300 episodes now.
That is
Yes, yes.
incredible. I
So
love it. And to be able to honor that many people and to, to share that inspiration of those relationships and honoring
yeah,
others, I think that's such a beautiful and inspiring, way to, build those million-dollar
yeah,
relationships and to have that value. I love that. So
absolutely. Absolutely.
wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Kevin. I so appreciate you and I hope you have a fabulous day.
Well, thanks so much, Michelle. Really, had a great time. Thanks a lot.
Good. You're welcome. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Marketing Hour. If you loved this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs a little marketing inspiration today. For more insights and resources, head over to thesavvycmo.com. And remember, your next big breakthrough might be one strategy away. See you next time.